the workout that builds that's the most effective at building muscle is going to be the one that's going to be the most effective at preserving it.
Got it.
When you're losing weight. So you want to lift weights or do strength training of some type. So your body weight bands, machines, weights. Strength training, don't cut too much. And here's the third part, high protein.
The 7 biggest diet and weight loss myths.
Yeah.
You are my go-to expert for all things fitness. And you don't hold any punches. You lay it out for people. And I think that's why you're so popular, why so many people around the world love you and come to you for fitness advice. So what are the 7 biggest weight loss and nutrition myths?
Yeah, so there's way more than 7, but I picked the 7 that I think are most widely accepted as truths and the ones that tend to cause the most damage. The ones I think that direct people in the wrong way the most often, and the ones that I always have to constantly counter. Both as a trainer, when I used to train people, and even now as the host of the podcast, Mind Pump. So the first one is, and I know you talk about this all the time, and you've actually gone back and forth with people about this as well, which is it's all about calories, right? So if you want to lose weight, it's all about the calories. That's all that matters. And there's some truth to that in the sense that, yes, you do need to eat less calories than you burn in order to lose weight. That's a law of thermodynamics, right? So it's a rule of physics. But it oversimplifies a far more complex issue because the calories matter, but what you eat and what make up those calories and your relationships to food dictate how you feel, is it sustainable, and your experience with your diet. And if you look at what motivates us to eat the way that we do, and we were to list all the reasons we eat, why we eat, or what we eat, down that list is near the bottom is, well, because we need nutrients and calories. Above that is things like how I feel. Am I anxious? Am I stressed? Am I happy? Am I sad? Am I bored? Connecting with people. I just literally said, hey, next time you come up to San Jose, come eat over, right? We're going to eat food and connect and bond over that. So that's another reason. We eat because we have attachments to foods that maybe go back to childhood. Very rarely is it where we think to ourselves, I need to nourish my body with calories. I need this many macronutrients. I need these proteins, these fats, and carbohydrates. So although calories are very important, that's actually one of the smallest things that we need to consider. What we need to look at is our behaviors, why we eat the way that we eat, how we feel after we eat, before we eat, during we eat, and how do we modify those behaviors so that we can lead to the lower calories that helps us lose the weight, because we're not robots where you can input data and then follow, points of data. We're emotional, behavioral based creatures. And if we just focus on the calories, we totally ignore that. And we've known about calories for, I don't know how many decades now. And the obesity issue is just getting worse.
Worse and worse and worse. And
the fail rate with diets, and all diets that cause weight loss are low calorie, but the fail rate is still 85, 90%. This is after a year or two, right? I think if you stretch it out even longer, you probably get close to 100%.
Wow.
So we're doing it all wrong, and it's not all about the calories. It's everything that leads to the calories that we need to focus on.
So unpack, because sometimes you see people online on social media claim that 100 calories of, say, Fruit Loops is equivalent to, from the standpoint of weight loss, 100 calories of eggs.
Yeah, that totally ignores, first off, okay, yes, they're both 100 calories. And if they both lead to a calorie deficit, will they lead to some weight loss? Yes, but there's a couple things that we're missing. One is more minor than the other. The more minor thing is weight loss doesn't necessarily mean fat loss, okay? So the types of foods that you eat that make up those calories does play a big role in whether or not you lose muscle or preserve muscle or build muscle. And that's very important. You don't want to lose 20 pounds of muscle, because then you're just a smaller, even higher body fat percentage version of yourself. You want to keep that muscle. But more importantly, what makes up those calories determines how you feel.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that eating 100 calories of Fruit Loops is going to make you feel the same as 100 calories of eggs. It just doesn't work that way. And what do feelings lead to? We just talked about it, right? If I feel good, bad, or I feel like I'm having withdrawal, or my blood sugar crashes, or I feel tired or irritable because the food that I just ate wasn't great for me, that's going to lead to things like cravings and behaviors that are not conducive to long-term sustainability when it comes to weight loss.
But there's also, I mean, there is a difference in terms of the net energy value of both 100 calories worth of Fruit Loops
Also,
and 100 calories worth of eggs, right? Because with the eggs, first of all, there's a difference in highly refined, in the thermic effect
Yes.
of highly refined processed carbohydrates, grain-based carbohydrates versus whole foods, right? So right there. But then there's also a difference in the thermic effect when comparing fat and carbohydrates to protein. And so if you take something like Fruit Loops, which is primarily refined carbohydrates, right? And you compare it to eggs, which are primarily protein, maybe a little bit of fat, there is a difference in net energy ingested.
yes, I'm glad you said that. There was a study, I can't remember where I read it, but they compared a whole natural, I should say whole natural, but a more whole-based sandwich to a more process-based sandwich.
I remember that.
Okay, so it's like a whole grain, cheddar cheese type sandwich versus a white bread, cheese product, sandwich, right? And they looked at how the people, after they consumed them, what did their metabolisms do? And there was a 50% decrease in metabolic activity, or should I say calorie output, from the processed food versus the more whole natural version of the sandwich. What we tend to forget is we look at the calories in versus calories out model, and we look at the calories out model and we think it's this flat number. But that number is adjusting every second, right? The amount, your body is going more or less efficient with calorie burn all the time. All the catecholamines your body produces, norepinephrine, epinephrine, your hormones, testosterone, cortisol, insulin, growth hormone, right? In women, estrogen and progesterone, and those play a role with men as well. Even your experiences can change that from second to second. So to simplify something that complex and just say, well, it's the same because the calories are the same, even if the macros are the same, that's not true. And it's interesting to me because I'll when I talk to people about this, without even having to go into the weeds, I'll say, well, let me ask you a question. Is your experience different from eating those two separate foods? And they'll say yes. I'll say, well, what does that mean? Is our experience, does that mean anything? Of course it does. Our experience comes from chemicals in the brain and the body, and either the experience causes it or those cause the experience, or both, right? So to say that they're the same is such an oversimplification of something that's so complex and elegant that it's a massive disservice. I think it's silly.
Yeah, I hate seeing that online calories are all that matter for weight loss. Like they absolutely matter, but we have to be more specific with our intention, right? Do we just want to lose weight, or do we want to lose fat, mass? Because for a given volume, right, doesn't muscle weigh more than fat anyway? Yeah,
muscle takes up roughly two-thirds or a little bit more of the space that body fat for the same amount of weight, right?
Wow.
So if you lost 10 pounds of body fat but gained 10 pounds of muscle, you'd lose about 1/4 to maybe 1/3 of your size. So it's much more dense. It's also metabolically active differently, right? Fat is more estrogen sensitive. In fact, lots of body fat can produce more estrogen. And the body can produce insulin resistance. Muscle does the opposite. Muscle is very testosterone sensitive. It can help create more free testosterone. It's very insulin sensitive. I mean, it's one of the ways our body stores glycogen, right? We store it in our liver, and then our muscle actually stores quite a bit. So it's very different having one, and of course it looks different. I mean, if you looked at a 6 foot, 200 pound male who was 20% body fat versus 10% body fat, they would look drastically different. And this is true for women as well. When women have more muscle at the same body weight, in other words, being leaner, they look smaller, more sculpted, and tighter. And then, of course, there's the function. Body fat on your body doesn't really, you can't flex body fat. It doesn't move your body. It doesn't improve your mobility. You need to have some body fat on your body. There's some essential amounts. But when you compare it to muscle, past that essential amount, right? Muscle helps your body move. It gives you mobility. So like I said, it's so simple. It's so simplified when people do that. And what it comes from, Max, is it comes from the fanatics in the health space, in particular in my space, right? In the space where that I tend to work in, which is a little bit more fitness oriented.
Yeah.
And fanatics they forget that they're who they are, and they tend to talk to themselves. So if I'm a fanatic and I love it, or I'm obsessive, which is a huge percentage of these people, then yeah, I just count everything because I'm obsessive, and that's what I do. And I look at my food and I go, oh, I'm 3 grams lower of protein, so let me take a 3 gram scoop of protein powder. Or my calories are, I need another 15 calories of fat. Let me go eat 10 peanuts. And I'm not just making this up. I've literally seen people add a half a tablespoon of peanut butter because their fat was off, and so they needed to get it just a bit higher. Or they'll eat, 2/3 a can of tuna fish because the extra 1/3 puts them over. It's like nobody lives that way.
Yeah. I mean, if your intent is to be a professional bodybuilder, like that makes
Totally
a little
different.
bit more sense, right?
Totally different.
Yeah.
And who wants to be a professional bodybuilder?
Well, you and your homies, right?
No, I don't want to be a professional bodybuilder.
Well, not you, but Adam.
He did it for a bit. It's funny when you should have him on and talk about that experience. He did it later on in his career as a mature trainer who was more self-aware, and he even was like, "Man, that is a very dysfunctional way of living." And
Wow.
he'll say if he did that in his early 20s, it would have really messed him up.
Interesting.
Yeah, because of the dysfunction and the food relationship that you need to kind of create and have when you're in that space. If you want to find a space with tremendous, a high percentage of eating disorders and body image issues, go to the bodybuilding space.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. I mean, there was a time when I'm interested in bodybuilding science because I think it's fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm super into that. I know you are too. But yeah, I've never wanted to actually be a bodybuilder.
No.
I don't know the genetics for it, but like.
No, I like feeling fit and strong. I like lifting heavy things because that's just something I enjoy doing. But as far as the look is concerned, I like the classic ideals that you see from like Eugene Sandow, right? These were strong men and bodybuilders at the turn of the, at the 19th century, like before, protein powders existed, and they were very, fit, lean, muscular. They looked quite functional. What you see today is extreme. I mean, but all sports have gone extreme because that's just the way it works. But yeah, no, most people don't want to look that way, and definitely most people don't want to live the way that's required to look that way. I think when you really boil it down and you talk to people, they want to be relatively lean. They want to feel healthy. They want to feel mobile, have good energy, and they want to have a balanced life. They don't want to live this obsessive life. And I think, again, a lot of the information we get communicated from the fitness space comes from the extremes. And so you get a lot of this hype, motivation, kill it, crush it, kill yourself in the gym. If you're really serious, then you'll do it this way. Otherwise, forget it type of deal. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. So calories definitely matter. You got to be in a calorie deficit if your intent is to lose fat, but it's not the only thing that matters.
No, it's so much more effective to work on the behaviors that lead to the caloric intake that's right for your body. It's interesting. There's this belief, and it's wrong. There's this belief that humans are eating machines in the sense that because we evolved for most of human history with scarcity, that we evolved to just eat everything in our sight if it's put in front of us. That's not true. Eating too much would have killed us back then, just like it would have killed us now. I mean, shoot, you get gut issues, 30,000 years ago, you're dead, right?
Mm.
So we have built-in systems of satiety, palate fatigue, right? Palate fatigue exists. So, go eat too much of something and you kind of get sick of it. You ever do that where you eat like a meal, like, oh, I don't want it anymore. And then they bring out something that's totally different, like dessert. And all of a sudden you overcome palate fatigue, right?
Yeah.
That exists because it's part of our makeup. So if we work on those behaviors and eat foods that lead to that, what we'll find is this much more natural balance. Now, what does that look like? It doesn't look like 5% body fat, but it also doesn't look like 50 pounds overweight. What it looks like is for men, you're probably going to sit around 14, 15% body fat. For women, you're probably going to sit somewhere between 22 to 25% body fat. And obviously genetics can determine a little leaner or a little bit more body fat. And that's relatively healthy and fit and you feel good. And of course, if you want to go leaner and push it a little harder, you totally can. Or if you want to relax and go in the other direction a little bit, you totally can. But that balance exists. The problem is that the food that that we consume most of has been engineered in ways to kind of overcome that. And so it's like the signals are all off.
Yeah.
It's almost like, if potato chips existed 100,000 years ago, people would have overate them back then too. So
100%.
It's just we've designed these foods, and we've developed behaviors around food that really don't lend themselves well to being healthy.
And the push towards lower protein diets,
crazy,
I think, is a major problem, right?
Crazy.
We know that protein is the most satiating macronutrient, and there's a reason for this, right? There's a reason. It's like when you deplete protein from a food item, right? You increase the margin, because protein is low margin. It's hard to produce. It's expensive to produce, right? So you make food more profitable when you deplete it of its protein.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. And protein is very satiating. It also, have you seen the CGM, like the studies with these continual glucose monitors and how protein affects your blood sugar? So we had somebody on the show, right? This is a nutritionist that works with the CGM company. And so she does nutrition coaching, but she also has the feedback and the information from the person's CGM. So it's really cool. I wish I had these when I was a trainer. And she says, if you just eat the protein, if you eat a meal and you eat the protein first, you see a much more blunted blood sugar response. If you start your day off with protein, the rest of the day, you see a better blood sugar response.
Wow.
Now, why is that important? These ups and downs in blood sugar, they don't make you feel so good. And when we don't feel so good, we tend to reach for things that bring us comfort. And for a lot of us, that's food. So if we can work with foods in ways that helps us feel in ways that will give us the behaviors that lead to eating healthier, that's the successful approach. Protein is a big part of that. Protein's I used to do this with clients. This is way back in the day, and this was just through trial and error. I would tell my clients things like, because I learned, not early on, it took me a while actually. I wasn't a great trainer for the first 5 years at least. But I remember figuring this out, and telling clients to take things out of their diet or cut things was far less successful than telling people to add things. It's just psychology, right? So what I would say to people is I'd say, okay, here's what I want you to do. We're not going to cut anything out of your diet. But what I want you to aim for is 30 grams of protein for every meal, for example, depending on the person. So they'd say, okay. And I'd say, now you have to eat that 30 grams first. So every meal is going to have your 7 ounces of chicken or whatever. Eat that first, then eat the rest. And then they would lose weight.
Wow.
Why? Because the protein would be so satiating that they would end up eating less. And I didn't tell them to cut anything out. I would just tell them to eat that protein. Protein also preserves muscle. It's good for longevity. I know that there's these, and what's funny, they bring up, you'll see these people bring up studies on mTOR, mammalian target rapamycin, which is this signaler of tissue growth and muscle growth. And they'll say, oh, mTOR can drive cancer and do all these different things. Therefore, we have to eat less protein. They really twist the data with something like that. In the context of cancer, proteins, fats, carbohydrates can feed cancer.
Yeah.
All those things can feed cancer.
Exactly.
In the context of not cancer, mTOR is great. It repairs and builds muscle. It adds to performance. There's nothing wrong with stimulating mTOR in a natural way at all. And protein does that. Protein is anabolic.
Yeah, life breaks you down. It's the concept of entropy, right?
Yes.
So you got this this pathway in your body that's literally working night and day, provided you're feeding yourself properly to build yourself back up, right? To create scaffolding that keeps you strong and resilient and robust.
Yes. And the other thing too is in nature, what typically follows along with protein, because if you look at nature, pre-agricultural revolution, right? Definitely before grocery stores and processed foods, where humans evolved for the most part, what foods were high protein foods? It was typically animals. We didn't have, before agricultural revolution, it's not like you're going to go find a field of legumes that you could, get protein sources from. It was animals. So when you found protein in nature, what typically was attached to it were fats. So you got the other essential macronutrient, because when you eat an animal, there's going to be fats in there as well. And then all kinds of nutrients that are hard to come by. Your B vitamins, your irons, your D, some of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet are these animal sources of protein.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that, this is something that we should eat, and we should eat a decent amount of.
Do you follow Ty Beal on Twitter?
No, who's that?
He's a great researcher. He's published a bunch of different papers, but recently published a paper where he basically identified the most nutrient dense foods, like based on the nutrients of concern, the nutrients that like tend to be underconsumed. And at the top of the list, with the exception of dark leafy greens, because dark leafy greens, they contain nutrients and they're also very calorie sparse.
Yes.
So they would potentially qualify, at least according to his study, they qualified for as a nutrient dense food. But other than dark leafy greens, it was whole milk, it was oysters, it was liver, it was beef, it was eggs.
Yeah.
All high protein animal products.
Yeah. It's funny. It's hard to overdose on certain nutrients in nature, but this is how dense organ meats are. You can actually eat too much iron from eating too much liver, right? That's how nutrient dense it is. You can't do that with almost any other food. It's literally nature's multivitamin. And then, dark leafy greens, they are very nutrient dense, but remember, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates are also nutrients. They're macronutrients. Dark leafy greens contain very little of all three. So if you need to eat something that's going to give you all the stuff that you need, you're going to go with the animal sources.
Yeah, you wouldn't go with the dark leafy greens. I mean, I think the dark leafy greens do contain probably like some vitamin C, maybe a little bit of magnesium, and certain. I mean, there's like folate. Folate's a big one.
Yeah,
right?
I think a lot of the value that you get from greens has more to do with the aiding in the microbiome and digestion. Than the nutrients.
Would agree.
So that's why I eat them. I eat them because they help my digestion. And they help feed my microbiome, which is also very important. And fiber, although not considered essential, I think it's probably an essential. I would say it's one of the essential nutrients. Yeah.
It's hard to. It's like I'm not prone to conspiracy theories, but I mean, the whole like they're trying to keep us weak.
Don't get me started.
No, I know. I mean, I don't think that they're trying to keep us weak. I think that they're just trying to like maximize profit dollars, maximize the bottom line.
Yeah.
And as a inconvenient sort of side effect that's leading to a weak population. It's just that it's like that's just not appreciated by the authorities at large.
Yeah, if you follow the dollars, there's a lot of money in the beef industry, a lot of money in the dairy industry, a lot of money in the egg industry and chicken and pork, but none of those things are patented. You can't patent right now. I can't have a beef, like I can't give you steak that's patented. You can only get it from me.
Right.
But we found a way to patent plants through GMOs. So they're very profitable in that sense. The beef industry is an industry, and there's lots of farmers. And what that does, it drives the margins down and it makes it very competitive. With GMOs, it's very interesting because now I can sell you a product, even if it's a whole product like a corn on the cob, no one else can sell it because it's GMO.
It's not just GMO though. It's like it's like the companies behind Oatly, or like the Beyond Meat products or Impossible Burger, or like these are all proprietary formulations, recipes, right? That can yield billion-dollar exits.
Yeah, and that's the part that makes me that's the motive, I would say, because it is very interesting the direction that I'll tell you something right now. And I like saying this, not saying that this is evidence or proof, but had you followed mainstream health narrative and government advice over the last 4 decades, you'd be sick.
Yeah.
You'd be sick and unhealthy. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was hammered into us that margarine was healthy and butter was bad. You got to eat margarine. Don't eat butter.
That's how I grew up. Yeah,
totally. I remember when eggs, egg yolks. Oh no, don't eat the egg yolks. They're so bad for you. Skim milk. Everybody was like, well, if you have milk, have the fat-free. You know what? Skim milk has been shown to cause nutrient deficiencies because you don't have the fat to absorb the fat-soluble nutrients.
Wow, interesting.
It's I remember all that. Vegetable oils instead of, so these are the same people now that are telling us, hey, that burger, that patty that you have, that's one ingredient, here's a better option. Here's one that we invented and engineered to make it taste as much like that as possible, but it's plant-based. Somehow that makes it healthy. It doesn't work that way.
No. Soon they're going to have you eating bugs. That's like the next evolution.
I know.
of all this. Okay. The next myth that we want to bust here on the show. The more I work out, the better.
Yeah.
But you see people in the gym that are there like 7 days a week, right? For hours and hours and hours, spending tons of time on the treadmill.
Yeah. This one really damages, is very damaging, because if you train, look at it this way. It's like a bell curve. Too little exercise will give you very little results. The right dose of exercise will give you the best results, and then too much will give you too little. Exercise is a stress on the body, and this depends on the individual, right? But too much of a stress on you means your body can't adapt, improve, get stronger, burn body fat, and do those things. You'll actually put your body in a very scary place of stress, and overtraining can have very detrimental effects on people's health. You can give yourself osteoporosis from overtraining. You can cause insulin resistance from overtraining. You could kill yourself by pushing your body too hard, too often. Hormone imbalances is usually how it starts off. So you want to train appropriately, and you also want to make sure it's effective and it works for you. So you want to give your body enough stress to adapt, but not too much so that it can only worry about healing and recovering. So to use another example, our body's ability to darken when exposed to the skin is a form of adaptation, right? So imagine if you live in your mom's basement for 5 years, you never go out in the sun, and then you go outside to get tanned. Do you go out there and just burn? No, you go out and you get like a little bit and you go back down and you wait, and then you go out and you get a little more, and then your body starts to adapt. Too much would just burn your skin, wouldn't give you a tan any faster, and would cause a lot of damage. So with exercise, it's totally true. Part of the problem, or part of the driving factor behind that, is the I need to burn calories. I need to move more. So the more I move, the better. Yes, activity definitely is healthy for you, and more activity tends to be better than less activity, but at some point it's too much, like I said earlier. But also forget about those calories that you burn while you move. If it's calories you're after, teach your body to burn more calories. Build more muscle. Get your metabolism to speed up. Make it a sustainable process. So again, unless you're a fitness fanatic, you don't mind exercising all the time, what if you could just get your metabolism to be faster on its own? So, you could do your desk job and hang out with your kids, and you work out a few days a week, but you're burning more calories on your own. I think that's a much better approach.
Yeah. Is it true that you're actually growing, like your muscles grow outside of the gym? Like they grow while you're resting?
Yeah. And your muscles also don't just maintain, they grow or they shrink, or they grow or they shrink. So it's, muscle protein, it's protein breakdown, protein synthesis. What causes muscles to grow is where synthesis outweighs the breakdown, and vice versa. But yeah, the growth process happens, the adaptation process happens after the stimulus or after the stress. So you do the stress, then you go through, your body starts to recover. Simultaneously, typically, they kind of overlap. You get this adaptation that starts to happen. They're both separate, by the way. Healing is not the same as adapting. So then the adapting starts to happen. And if you do everything right, you're incrementally stronger, and you have a little bit more muscle or protein, right? A contractile protein or whatever in your body than you did before. And over time, that turns into 1 pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds of muscle.
Wow. So it's a myth that you need to kill yourself in the gym 7 days a week.
The stress and the stimulus needs to match the person's fitness level. So if I took a professional athlete whose body's already at a super high peak level, and who's adapted, they've already gotten their body to adapt to such a high level, the stimulus required to get their body to adapt any further is going to be pretty high. Right? Like if I'm trying to get a world record holder at the marathon faster, I'm not going to have him run, 1 lap. He's going to have to push, or she's going to have to push herself much harder. For the average person, it's way less. You're not going to get those results by pushing yourself like a marathon, like a world champion marathon runner. If anything, like I said, it's going to be too much. So it needs to be appropriate for your fitness level. And, at some point, whatever you're doing, you're going to have to do more to continue to progress. But a lot of people at some point, look, I tell you, I've worked with a lot of people, Max, and a good workout, what I mean by good is appropriate, like a well-programmed workout. Programming refers to what the workout is made up of. So like the exercises, the sets, the reps, the tempo. If the programming is good and appropriate for the person, 2 to 3 days a week, most people are more than satisfied with how they look and feel with 2 or 3 days a week. More than that, and then you start to get into the more advanced levels of training. But most people, 2 or 3 days a week, if they do it right and they're consistent, they're happy. They're very, very happy with how they look.
And with increased training volume, you also have to, you have to like be able to support your body nutritionally through that, right? Like more protein. That's when you really start to have to pay more attention to things like daily protein intake, et cetera.
Oh yeah. You want to aim for generally, of course there's individual variance here, but generally speaking, for normalish body weight individuals. So if you're obese, you might want to use lean body mass, in other words. But for most people, you want to aim for about 0.6 to 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. That's what the literature shows to be the upper limit of benefit that you'll get for protein. Any more than that, you're not going to build fat muscle faster, recover faster, or anything like that. Less than that, and you will see results that don't happen as quickly or as effectively. Another note on that with protein is when your protein intake is in that higher limit that I just said, the sources of protein don't matter as much because you're getting so many amino acids that if it's collagen, if it's fish, if it's beef, if it's plant, doesn't make that big of a difference. When your protein intake is lower than that, like most people don't eat 0.6 to 0.8. When they eat a little lower than that, the type of protein makes a big difference. Now that's when you can see that animal protein, gram per gram in that range is going to build more muscle and give you more of the beneficial effects than, let's say, plant protein, right?
Yeah.
So plant protein is not going to be gram per gram as effective. Once it gets into those higher limits, it doesn't really matter. In fact, there was a study that came out that when they controlled for essential amino acids, in other words, all the amino acids, those essential ones were the same level. There was no difference between animal or plant protein. The only problem is that in order to get your plant proteins to match the essential amino acids of animal proteins, you have to consume a lot more.
Yeah.
So it'd be like 60 grams of protein versus 40 type of deal. So I like to tell that to people because some people eat so much protein, they're like, which source of protein? It doesn't matter anymore because you're eating so much. But most people don't do that.
Yeah, that's a very important nuance that I'm super glad that you brought up. And it's also going to be music to anybody listening to this who's on a plant-based diet, like their ears, because there's this idea that animal protein is higher quality in all contexts. And it's, that we should prioritize it in all contexts compared to plant protein. And though animal protein is higher quality than plant protein, the difference really, it makes less of a difference when you're actually eating enough protein. Yeah,
if you're eating, if you're a 150 pound male and you're eating 130 grams of protein, it's not going to make a difference. As long as they're complete proteins, which, if you're eating a well-balanced vegan diet or plant-based diet, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, but the irony is that vegans tend to underconsume protein.
Always, of course.
And so for them, this can be a problem if you're on a plant-based diet and you're not cognizant of how much protein you're eating.
Oh yeah, if you're plant-based or vegan and you're trying to reap the benefits of a high protein diet, it's hard to do with whole natural foods because the volume of food that you have to consume and all the other calories that come along with it can make it challenging, and even digestive issues. Like if I try to eat, like legumes are a high protein plant food, but to eat like 40 grams of protein from legumes doesn't digest quite well for a lot of people. Some people are okay with it, but a lot of people not necessarily. So with my vegan clients, plant-based protein powders were very, very beneficial, super beneficial, because they would hit a certain amount with their food, and then we'd throw in a shake or two of their plant-based protein, and then they'd get in that upper limit. Or essential amino acid supplements. So another thing that I would do with some vegan clients is with their meals, I would have them take 4 or 5 essential amino acid tablets, and that would bring that essential amino acid number up. And they would get huge benefit. I mean, in regards to supplements, if you supplement for your needs, you get tremendous value. If you just take supplements, it doesn't make that big of a difference.
Right.
And plant-based and vegans, they tend to do really well with protein supplements, essential amino acid supplements, and creatine. Creatine makes a big difference for vegans. It makes a difference for everybody, but vegans really see, my vegan clients used to be blown away by how great they felt from taking creatine.
Not just in terms of their physical performance and body composition, but from mentally, cognitively.
I'm not talking about physical. I mean, physical, yes, but I'm talking about cognitive.
Wow.
Actually, studies will show IQs go up. from taking creatine if you're vegan. They would notice mood benefits, energy, and cognitive benefits. They'd say things like, "Oh my God, I'm so sharp," or "I feel so much better at work." And they would take like 3, 4, 5 grams of creatine every day.
Yeah. I get actually asked like what my go-to creatine is. And I think it's really important for people to know that what you want to look out for is creatine monohydrate. That's it. Right? That's it. It doesn't matter really what brand.
No, as long as it's clean and pure, right?
Clean and pure,
As long as it's from a good source. Yeah, there's creatine, when that hit the scene, I remember when that hit, I'm sure you remember too. It was like the first supplement that actually did something.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. And because of that, the supplement industry, of course, they capitalize on that. And so then you had all these companies come out with like different versions of creatine, saying that their version, this one's buffered, this one's citrate, this one's whatever. This one reduces bloating or whatever. They'll come up with their own. And no studies. And creatine's well studied. There's thousands and thousands of studies on creatine. And creatine monohydrate outperforms all of them and is the least expensive. And that's the one that has the most studies. So I'd say go with that one.
Yeah, it's also a natural molecule that is now synthesized, right? So it's not, it's plant-based essentially. Like they don't, even though it's naturally found in muscle tissue, that's not where they derive it from. It's synthesized.
No, you can get vegan creatine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, in fact, I think most creatine monohydrate is vegan sourced.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good for the mitochondria of the cells. It's a longevity supplement. In fact, you're going to start seeing it marketed that way as a longevity supplement.
The only thing that I don't like about I'm currently taking creatine, so I'm on it. I take 5 grams every day. I didn't load. I just started.
Yeah, that's
because I'm under the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure you know, that you can either do the 25 grams a day loading period for 5 days, or you can just take the 5 gram maintenance dose, and you'll get to the saturation period that you would otherwise get with the loading phase after about like 28 days or something like that.
Yeah, it just takes a little longer.
It takes longer.
Yeah,
but
I don't like the I don't like the loading phase.
It's just too much.
Yeah, that much creatine too can cause gastric upset. So.
Yeah, it's all because you're like choking down sand, essentially. Yeah.
No, I go 5 grams. I've been taking creatine almost nonstop since I was 15.
Damn. You're just like half creatine.
No,
your body is like...
No, it's great. You know what's great about that? Obviously, as a kid, my motivations were different. But thankfully, all the studies coming out showing that it was a healthy supplement. I would hate to look back and be like, I've been taking this thing for so long and it was bad for me.
And is creatine okay to take for women? Because that's a big...
Oh, it's great for everybody. There's this there's this whole like, it makes you hold water, which is true, but it's not what people think. It's not bloat. So like bloat is outside the muscle, but makes you look smooth and puffy. This draws water into the muscles. So your muscles feel tighter and fuller, and they contract better and they're stronger. So it's not bloat. It's your muscles are more hydrated is what it is. So when you take creatine, you will tend to see the scale move up a little bit. So like a woman may see 1 or 2 pounds of muscle density go up. So you're just going to feel tighter.
Does it make you look sexy?
Yeah. Yeah. And guys might go up 3, 4 pounds.
Because it's like what you're retaining water, but it's in your muscle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Love that. Okay. Next myth. I think we're on 3 or 4. I've lost track. But fasting, that you have to fast for weight loss.
Oh, gosh. This one's a big one. Fasting is interesting. We used to call it not eating when I was a trainer back in the day. But okay, so fasting has benefits. But the benefits of fasting come from the detachment, I don't know, dare I say spiritual aspect. I don't mean the metaphysical, but the detachment from this worldly thing that we tend to develop, relationships with. That's the value of it. This is why fasting is present in every spiritual practice and religion. The health benefits, the cell autophagy, the weight loss, whatever, those can all be accomplished by just cutting your calories for the most part. I don't like fasting for weight loss because it's a wonderful way to encourage a bad relationship with food. It really is. When somebody is trying to lose weight and they restrict or avoid food completely in the pursuit of losing weight, what you're actually encouraging is this restrict binge model of eating. And you'll see people do this. I eat, I have a 4-hour window that I eat in the evening, or I don't eat until 3 p.m. or whatever. And if you watch their behaviors when they eat faster, they eat more, and they eat until they're a bit uncomfortable.
Wow.
So it encourages that. Fasting also, in some people, can also induce a bit of a low-level stress. And this seems to be more prevalent in women than in men. I don't like not eating to try to lose weight. Now, if you're doing fasting for the purposes of detachment, tremendous value. just like there's fasting from electronics. I think there's a ton of value if you have a bad relationship with electronics, or going camping and detaching from the city. The same thing with food. For me, I derived tremendous benefit from fasting, but that's because I came from I need to eat every other hour, and I'm always trying to bulk, and I'm always trying to get bigger, and I'm afraid if I skip a meal, what's going to happen or whatever. So when I fasted, I broke those chains. And first off, I realized, my muscles don't just fall off my body. And I think I've developed a bit of a bad relationship with food where I need to have it with me all the time. And for other people, it could be, wow, I'm stressed, but I'm fasting. How do I deal with the stress? Normally, I put food in my mouth, or okay, what do I do with my time? I'm supposed to eat right now, but I don't. So, or maybe I'm bored. And so that's where I see the value in fasting. But fasting for body composition goals, like I said, it's a fast track towards disordered eating. It really is. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, and I like that you brought that up as opposed to just solely being focused on the mechanics of weight loss.
No, the mechanistic aspects of weight loss, we focus so heavily on. And first off, I think it's cool. And I think we need to know how things work in the body. I think we need to know, and it's important to inform ourselves. I think it's important for the average person to have the information that's applicable to them. Sometimes we can overload people with, I love this stuff, and you and I could sit down and get real deep into this. But I think for the average person, it's beneficial for them to really kind of understand, proteins, fats, and carbs. And, these foods make me feel a particular way. These lead to satiety. These lead to behaviors or whatever. And these are my trigger foods. I think that's important. But I think if we focus too much on the mechanisms, we miss the big part, which is the behaviors and the relationship with food. That's the part that we need to focus on. The other stuff, if we think we're robots, sure, but we're not, right? So focus on those behaviors, the attachments, the emotional aspects. It's funny, when they do studies on diets, all of them have a very similar fail rates, like north of 80, 85%. Do you know who's actually, what category of weight loss is actually more successful?
What?
Therapy.
Interesting.
Therapy. Not even dietitians, like therapists. Like you go to a therapist because you're obese and you're like, I overeat and I have this bad relationship with food. And the therapist works on your relationships with food and how you abuse it or use it to numb yourself. The success rate on that is much higher than when people go on a diet. That just highlights kind of what I'm talking about.
Fascinating. I do think that for some people, though, the framework of intermittent fasting is a heuristic that can be helpful to some. It provides guardrails because your average person is eating 16 hours a day, right? From the second they wake up until just before they go to sleep. And also, like, nighttime eating is a big, significant problem for somebody. And if they're able to skim off 300, 400, 500 calories a day by not eating before 10 a.m. and after 8 p.m.
Yeah.
I feel like that's potentially helpful.
It can be. I think it's, I look at it as structure versus fasting, right? So do I give myself some parameters and some structure to help me move in this particular direction? So one of them may be, I'm probably not going to eat past 6 p.m. You know why that works so well, by the way, is, obviously it lowers calories, but the foods that people tend to eat past 6 p.m. tend to not be so great, especially when you get past 9 p.m.
Interesting.
Right? So think of like all the foods that you eat after 10.
In front of the TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually not the greatest
types
of foods, right?
People aren't eating protein like while they're watching their favorite Netflix show.
No, nobody's grilling chicken and eating, it's usually, chips or something hyper palatable.
It's literally all junk.
Yes, usually. So I like structure like that. Like, you could say something like, if you identify this in yourself, let's say you identified that your most stressed time of the day is noon, because that's in between my meetings and I hate everything. And you find that at noon, you go get that fast food, down the street. So then you may say to yourself, you know what? I'm not going to eat at noon anymore. And because I've identified that I'm not in the best state of mind around that time. So I'm just going to avoid eating at noon. So I like structure like that. That makes sense. But now you're working with your own behaviors and you're knowing yourself. You're kind of understanding what leads to behaviors that move you in the wrong direction.
I'm actually trying to, I already eat like a high protein diet, but I'm actually trying to like bring it up even further, my daily protein intake than it was before. And one of my favorite snacks that I'm having right now, like as I'm like winding down, maybe watching a show on TV, it's It's a serving of Greek yogurt. So it's about 170 grams of like fat-free Greek yogurt, because it's a wonderful high protein food, right? Nothing against full fat dairy products. In fact, full fat dairy is great, but I'm reaching for the. I've got this fat-free Greek yogurt. It's got 18 grams of protein in it, and then I put a scoop of whey in it, and I mix it up, which is about 25 grams of protein right there. So I'm hitting like 40 grams of protein, and the whey is like flavored with vanilla and stevia, so it's like got this sweetness because the yogurt is plain. And then I'll sprinkle some frozen. I'll throw some frozen blueberries on top, just like like a couple dozen frozen blueberries. A little bit of bee pollen, which is super tasty. I love bee pollen, and maybe like some hemp seeds. And it's super great. It's like 40 grams of protein.
Yeah, that's a great
in the wee hours. Not many fat calories. In fact, very few fat calories, if any. And very few carbohydrates.
Yeah, it's a protein supplement. It's also a good protein profile. You have the casein and the whey. Casein's a slower digesting protein. Now, I don't want people to get like, supplement companies will sell you casein and say, this is the one you have before bed. And this is the one. But casein has some benefits that are separate from whey. Whey is anabolic differently than casein. So, and now we're getting into the weird specifics, but I know you like that stuff. So
yeah, I do.
Yeah,
casein, it's slower digesting actually because it coagulates in the stomach.
Is that what it is?
Whey doesn't.
Okay. Interesting. Actually, when you mix up, you ever have a casein shake?
No.
Like casein powder? No. It's like, it's thick. That's absolutely right. It's like thick and creamy, whereas whey is real thin.
Yeah.
And you need a blender. Casein, you typically need a blender. Yeah, it's hard to do a shaker cup. You get the clumps.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can't use like my trusty shaker bottle, I've got like a dozen of these things.
I know. You had me use one earlier.
Yeah, they're awesome. Okay. Next myth that we're busting definitively here on The Genius Live with Sal Stefano, the man, the myth, the legend. No carbs is best.
Yeah.
That a no carb diet is the best for weight loss.
Yeah.
For a very low carb diet. That low carb diets are superior for weight loss.
No, they're not. For some people, they work well, but they're not superior. You know what's funny? So when I was a kid, when I was younger, fat was demonized. It was all about low fat. And fat was what was making us fat. Fat was the obesity epidemic. And it was all about fat. Fat was bad. Every health food was low fat back in those days. And then Atkins comes out with his Atkins diet book, and it blew up specifically because it countered the narrative. It was so opposite from the narrative, and people lost weight on it that people were like, oh my God, I got to do this. Now, Atkins is just a low calorie diet, just like the low fat diets were in the past. So you're going to lose weight on it, but it's so different, right? So then this thing came out with, this belief that it was carbs that was causing us to get fat. And you'll find studies that show that, okay, carbohydrate intake increased, and that's the obesity epidemic kind of matches it. Really, I think it has more to do with heavily processed foods, which many of which are made with carbohydrates. It's just easier to make processed food snacks. It's hard to find a processed food protein snack.
Yeah.
It's usually carbohydrates. So that's where you're getting that from. And there's studies on cultures that are very healthy, that eat more carbohydrates and less fat than other cultures that eat higher fat and lower carbohydrates are also healthy. So I don't like to tell people low carb or no carb is the best, because now we're putting people in this kind of restricted diet. The fail rate is so high. So I think it's more important. What's more important is to kind of identify what works best for you and what you like the most and what gives you the best digestion and the best energy. Now, that being said, I will say this. Most people I've worked with do better on a moderate to low carbohydrate diet. Okay, so most people I've worked with feel more satiated, have more balanced energy, and seem to get better results with a moderate to low carbohydrate diet. But that's not all of them. I've also worked with clients that do much better with a higher carbohydrate diet. Now, that being said, proteins and fats, you need to have a certain amount because they're essential. And protein, high protein, if your diet is higher in carb, low in carb, high protein works better in both instances.
You don't need that much fat, though. I mean, observationally, I know that a lot of like bodybuilders tend to like dramatically cut the fat back.
Yeah.
Right. When they're in a cutting phase.
Yeah. But they're eating so many calories that they don't cut it down to past essential. Like you're eating 5,000 calories and then you're dieting at 3,500 calories. Right. Fats also tend to be easy to come by because they tend to stick to proteins. So if you eat your meat, your eggs, your dairy, that kind of stuff, you're going to have those fats. And then, fats for me, it's like olive oil. I mean, I put olive oil on everything, and I eat full fat, beef. I like to eat beef and,
Same.
grass fed beef and stuff like that. But yeah, it's, the demonizing and macronutrient, whether it's fat, carbs, protein, is such a terrible approach. It doesn't really work that way. It's really about balance. What foods make you feel best, and whole and natural. Whole and natural is really the commonality in any of these successful diets. Is, are we eating? If you look at all the healthy cultures of the world and you look at their diets, you'll find some commonalities and some things that are opposite. But the one commonality they all have is they all eat whole natural food diets. None of them are heavily processed food based diets.
Yeah. Also, I think when you say low carb, like low carb is relative, like low carb relative to the standard American diet. I mean,
Sure.
that's not a ketogenic diet necessarily.
No, ketogenic's like below 30 grams of protein.
Yeah.
30 grams of carbohydrates. No, lower carb for my clients was around like 150, 120, something like that, depending on the total calories. I don't consume a ton of carbs personally. I probably stick to 200 or less if I had to estimate. I just feel better that way. But I've identified that with myself. And like I said, I've had clients that feel way better with a lower fat, higher carbohydrate diet. Their digestion was better and they had more energy. Yeah.
I think that I eat probably what could be described as a low carb diet, but I still every day I eat like a piece or two of whole fruit, a couple sweet potato wedges maybe for lunch. But it's not like a zero carb diet.
Yeah. And you eat in ways that make you feel good.
Yeah.
I mean, if it felt better to eat more of the fruit or whatever, you would move in that direction.
Yeah.
That's basically my point. My point is, because I've had people literally, I've had people come up to me like, hey, I'm doing that ketogenic diet. I've been on it for 4 months and, I got that keto flu and I'm constipated. Like, when does that go away? I'm like, it's 4 months. This isn't working for you. Like, you got to listen to your body. This is not the diet for you. And that's my point with it, is that if we say it's no carb or low carb and people believe that, they ignore the signals that their body's telling them and they stick on these parameters. And then eventually they go off and they rebel.
Fascinating. Yeah. I try not to eat, too much added fats other than the extra virgin olive oil.
Mm-hmm. And
I definitely enjoy the fattier cuts of meat on occasion, even though I actually, I enjoy the fatty cuts of meat, but I know that it's probably, I know that it is healthier to stick to the leaner cuts more frequently.
Yeah. Have you noticed when you do go off and let's say you'll eat something that's processed or whatever, because you're so in tune, right? Have you noticed like how it affects your body and your cravings, and you ever trip over that?
Yeah, I could definitely tell with my digestion, because my digestion is pretty good. But if I eat something hyper processed the next day, pretty much I'm feeling it.
I find myself, I eat it faster, and then I find myself thinking about the bite that's not even in my hand.
Oh, definitely.
So I'm like, I've become aware of it a few times because I'll do it. Sometimes I'll go and I'll eat I love potato chips, so I'll eat potato chips. Rarely. I don't buy them because that's a food that I'll overeat for sure. Candy, I've had candy, sometimes I'd say probably, a couple times a month. And when I eat them, I like gummy candy. So if I have gummy, and I'll find myself like thinking about this one, not the one that's in my mouth. Yeah. And then I'll stop and be like, oh, this is a drug.
Yeah.
They've engineered the shit out of this, man.
It's insane. A lot of the stuff that I like, one of the things that I was like most recently obsessed with was this white chocolate by, it was like a keto white chocolate.
Oh.
It was delicious, by a company called Evolved. It's really, really freaking tasty. They nailed the white chocolate, keto, dairy free. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. But I would notice, cause when I like something, I like to just like drown myself in it. That's just how it's not that
you're a human. That's why.
Yes, exactly. I think that these foods are like, I think it's weird to not want to overeat these foods, right? Like the idea that we should be able to eat these foods in moderation to me is like, it's like advice that is just like not in synchrony with how our biology and our psychology work, right?
You're going to be playing this this game of willpower is what ends up happening.
Yeah.
That's why I don't have it in my house. This is what I used to tell clients is I used to say, look, I know you enjoy, chocolate. And I don't want to tell you not to eat it. It's something in life you enjoy and you derive pleasure from it. Eat the chocolate. Just don't have it in your house.
Yeah.
So if you want it, you go to the store and you buy yourself some, and then you eat it, and then it's gone. You create that barrier, right? That buffer between you and that impulse. So, I mean, that's why, like I said, that's why I don't have potato. If I have potato chips in my house, like let's say if we throw a party and my wife will go and she'll buy chips, whatever, tortilla chips or potato chips, because we have, family and friends and stuff over. And if there's leftover chips, I find myself walking the pantry and getting more and more and identify. So I just don't have them in the house because otherwise I'm playing this game of willpower. Like, why would I want to do that?
I like when snacks come in already portion control.
Yeah, that's good.
Packages. It might not be as smart for the environment, but I don't care.
Yeah.
It makes it easier for me to moderate my consumption of these foods that are not designed to be consumed in moderation. So when it's like, if it's ice cream, I like the ice cream like on a stick, pops or whatever they're called, because it's like, that's 120 calories right there that I know I'm not going to over consume. I'm not going to go past that, or like, if it's a bag of chips, I like the smaller bags of chips because I know I can just eat I could eat the bag. And mentally, it's a much bigger hurdle for me to I'm not going to let myself eat 2 bags of chips.
Yeah. It's a barrier between you and the impulse. Because if it's right in front of you and there's no barrier, the impulse continues. That's what it turns in. That's what I meant when I said I was eating the gummy candy and I was thinking about it became impulsive. So I tell people, so you can either buy individually packaged, or you could get yourself if you want to, be good with the environment, you could buy yourself little serving Tupperwares, put in your servings, put them in the cupboard, put the big container of the thing somewhere that's not as easily accessible. And so then you go in and you grab your little Tupperware and you eat it and then it's done.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else do you see in the fitness, in the online fitness space that really gets you, that really, bothers you? Because I feel like there's a lot of misinformation.
Well, in my space is very interesting because it's a lot of people who have a lot of popularity and who have big voices tend to, because they look really, really good. And a lot of them look really good because they're very obsessive. And, it's a lot of it's based on insecurities. That's why I started working out. So, and by the way, I don't want to make anybody feel bad. We all have our issues. So I totally get it. But because they get so much attention, their voices come out and they tend to promote things that like the hype and motivation, stuff. There's nothing wrong with motivation, but really attaching yourself to that feeling and depending on that feeling is a losing strategy because it goes away. It doesn't stay with you forever. So picking workouts that are hype and motivating and exciting, and that's what I'm always looking for, doesn't allow you, or at least it's not encouraging you to develop the skills and behaviors that allow you to stick around when the motivation goes away. So in the fitness space, you see a lot of that hype, a lot of that crush it and beast mode, and you just do it anyway and don't stop, and that kind of stuff. And that's because they like that stuff. Yeah. But when you communicate that to the average person, it tends to contribute to on, off. So I'm working out, I lost my motivation, I'm done. And I'm hyped again, and then I'm done. And it's this on, off type of thing. Another big myth or lie is the weight loss one, in the sense that, okay, so I'll tell you a story that's really interesting. So this actually happened to Adam. And I'll tell his story because I think it illustrates it so well. So when he managed, there was a gym that he managed, and he had like 30 trainers under him, and they all did a contest amongst the trainers. Let's see who could drop the most body fat in, I think it was like 2 months or something like that. And he had set up a deal with a underwater weighing company. So they would drive a truck to you and they would do a dunk test, which is the most accurate way of measuring body fat.
Interesting.
It's very consistent, right?
How does it work?
You've never done it before?
No.
Okay, so there's different ways to test body fat. There's body fat caliper.
Okay.
Then there's electronic impedance, like you hold the device in it, right? And then there's underwater weighing. Underwater weighing is the most accurate because they'll weigh your body outside the water, then in the water. And because they know what the buoyancy is of fat, they can subtract it. And it's not there's nothing that's 100% accurate, but it's as accurate as you can get.
Wow.
And so what they do is they put you in this like harness, and you breathe all the air out of your lungs, and you go under the water, and then they weigh you. So it's kind of claustrophobic, actually. If you've ever gone underwater with no air in your lungs, it's kind of weird.
It sounds scary.
But anyway, so he had this setup with this company that would come, and they would come and test the trainers as part of this contest. So they came and tested them. Everybody had their baseline, and then they did this big. I don't remember what the award was. It was like this big thing. Well, anyway, they got tested again, and a lot of the trainers' body fat percentage went up, And they were pissed. They're like, this machine is broken. These guys are full of crap or whatever. Why were they so pissed? Because they lost weight. They lost weight on the scale, but their body fat percentage went up. How is this possible? Here's what's happening here. If you weigh 200 pounds and you have 40 pounds of body fat on your 200 pound frame, that is what's your body fat percentage? 20%, right? 20% of your body is body fat. If you lose 10 pounds, or let's say you lose 20 pounds and you go down to 180 pounds, but you have the same amount of body fat on your body, 40 pounds, that now has become a larger percentage of your body weight.
Yeah.
And body fat percentage is what matters, not your total amount, right? Because a 250 pound muscular man can have way more body fat on his body and be shredded than a 100 pound man type of deal. So they lost weight, but their body fat percentage went up. Now, why'd that happen? Because they aggressively cut their calories and did a ton of cardio and made their bodies become more endurance based, which made them lose muscle.
They lost muscle.
They lost muscle.
Wow.
So they lost 10 pounds, but 7 was muscle and 3 was body fat, and their body fat percentage went up. This happens to people all the time. They'll lose weight on the scale and not realize that a good chunk of that was muscle. And now they're sitting at a lighter body weight, similar body fat percentage, maybe higher body fat percentage, with a slower metabolism, with less muscle. And they set themselves up for a really unsustainable future by doing something like that.
Now, to preserve muscle when dieting, you want to, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just sort of like, from a 30,000 foot view, what I believe to be true. You want to create a calorie deficit, but you don't want it to be too extreme, right? You want it to be maybe about 500 calories a day. Is that the general? Depending
on the amount of calories you're consuming, if you have if your metabolism is much faster, you could cut more. If it's much slower, you could cut less. So if you're not, if you have to go down to 1,300 calories, you don't want to go. I don't like to take people below. I don't like people going below 1,500 calories when they diet. I like to try and build their metabolisms up before I cut them down, because I want them to come to a place that they can maintain.
Got it.
Right. But yeah, you don't want to cut too much.
Too much, because then you risk muscle loss, right?
You do, because and it's not that your body burns muscle. It's not burning muscle. It's just paring it down. It's paring the muscle down to slow your metabolism down to match the energy intake. Energy output's trying to match the energy.
Because your body wants to survive.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. So don't cut too much. Lift weights. That's very important. You have to give your body a reason to have muscle.
Yeah. I've heard that you don't want to change your workouts. The same workout that you would do to optimally put on muscle is the same kind of workout that you want to do when you're in a calorie deficit, because it's going to be the best workout that preserves muscle.
Yeah. All strength training should be geared towards building muscle. And it doesn't matter if you want to lose weight, gain weight, what your diet, how you're moving your diet, because the workout that builds that's the most effective at building muscle is going to be the one that's going to be the most effective at preserving it.
Got it.
When you're losing weight. So you want to lift weights or do strength training of some type. So your body weight bands, machines, weights. Strength training, don't cut too much. And here's the third part: high protein.
Keep the protein high. Keep
the protein really high. And the lower, the bigger the cut, the higher in that range I gave you of 0.6 to 0.8 of protein you want. In fact, some people see results or better results going as high as a gram of protein per pound of body weight.
So you just want to bring the carbs and fat down. Because carbs and fat are energy.
Yes, carbs and fats. And because fats are essential at some point, then it's usually mostly carbohydrates. But like I said, I don't like to get people's calories too low. I like to see men cut no lower than 1,900 calories. And I don't like to see women cut with anything lower than like 50. If I have to go down lower than those numbers, then what I'll typically say is, okay, let's try to build your metabolism, because we're going to end up in a place that's not going to be very sustainable. We might get the weight loss, but now you're going to be sitting at 1,200 calories and your maintenance is at 1,500 afterwards. And then what?
Yeah. Is there like a formula that can help people determine ballpark their maintenance calorie needs?
God, I wish. I feel
like there is I think there is a calculator at the NIH website somewhere.
Yeah, we have one too. We have one on mapsmacro.com, but it's a general estimation. The best way that I found is to track your calories over a 2-week period, see what you normally eat. And if you don't gain or lose weight, then it's probably around there. But really just monitor how you feel, monitor your performance. And then you can test you can get your body fat tested, once every 3 or 4 weeks to see if the weight loss on the scale is body fat or muscle. Sometimes you can also gain weight and get leaner, right? So if your body fat stays the same, but you gain 5 pounds of muscle, your body fat percentage is now gone down. So body fat percentage tests are pretty good. The electronic impedance ones are the most convenient because you could just buy a device on Amazon, and usually it's with your hands or your feet. The only thing with those, and I'll caution people, is those can vary dramatically based on your water intake, food intake of the day, time of day. So if you do an electronic impedance test, do it at the same time every day, same, so I like to do first thing in the morning after a glass of water, and same time. That way you can get at least some consistency, and then don't freak out over 1 or 2 percentages. Just look at the trends. So is it trending up? Is it trending down? That'll give you a good idea.
Super helpful. What do you think when people say that a calorie isn't a calorie, or a calorie is a calorie? There's this debate, right?
What?
Well, there's it's really interesting because I'm obviously of the camp that argues that calories aren't all that matter, although they do matter, absolutely, right? But then sometimes you'll see on social media, people will say, that's right, a calorie isn't a calorie. But I think it requires, those are usually the people that are on my side, right? Yeah. But I think it requires a little bit of clarity so that people really are able to communicate the utility of calories accurately, right?
Yeah.
So it's important for people to know that a calorie is a calorie, because a calorie is a unit of measurement,
exists.
Right? It's like the same way that a mile is a mile.
Right.
You can walk a mile uphill, you can walk a mile downhill. They're both a mile, right?
Yeah.
It's much more difficult to walk uphill as compared to downhill. But a calorie is essentially a calorie, right?
It is. It exists, it's real, and it's a calorie. But I do get the whole a calorie is not a calorie side, because of how the metabolism adapts on a hour by hour basis. And so people will notice, hey, but the same calories don't do the same thing with me anymore. Well, it's not the calories that changed. It was the output part that changed, because your body's, constantly monitoring and modifying and adapting that. So there's that. There's also this. When you look at foods and you look at the calorie content, they're allowed to be 10% off.
That's right.
So, a 400 calorie, snack or food could be as high as 440 calories. That doesn't sound like much, but it adds up if that's how you eat, every single day, or you eat 2 meals and one's off by 10%. So is the other one. So I get that. It's also when people go, and apps are pretty good now, but I double check the app, because a medium banana is not what people typically think a medium banana is.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember doing this years ago. So back in the day, before we had apps and stuff, we used to have this Calorie King book. And this is how we would, work with clients, and we'd show them, this is, a sweet potato, this is whatever. And I remember in there, it said large sweet potato. And I think it was 70 grams of carbohydrates or 60 grams of carbohydrates. I don't remember how much it weighed, but it was a unit of weight. And I remember being I wonder how much this large sweet potato I have weighs. And it was almost twice as heavy as what the book said. So I'm okay, I got to go off the weight.
Do you notice that our food is getting bigger?
Way bigger.
It's insane.
We've bred it to be. You ever look at pictures? You ever look at old paintings of fruit?
Oh, it's insane.
Have you seen that?
Yeah. I've seen some. I've seen they're like the old watermelon.
Yeah. It's all rind and seeds. Yeah.
If you look at a crab apple, that was the OG apple.
Yeah.
Dude, there are Honeycrisps, and I love Honeycrisp apples, but sometimes you get them, they're the size of my freaking head.
Yeah.
They're massive.
We've done a really good job of breeding and changing our food to suit our needs and desires. Have you seen pictures of chickens?
No.
Oh, you haven't seen? Look at chickens from the 1950s. The ones that we have today are pro bodybuilder versions of the old. Oh, they're huge.
Damn.
They're all breast.
Wow.
And they look like dinosaurs compared to the old chickens.
They probably can't even walk. I mean, these poor chickens.
Oh, they look so different. A lot of our foods change because of the breeding. So if you want to be accurate with, calories and stuff, you probably have to weigh. Plus, people don't really have a good idea. You say 6 ounces of chicken, and most people have no idea what that looks like. And they'll say, oh, that looks like 6 ounces. Well, weigh it and get an idea so that next time you have a more accurate, idea of what 6 ounces looks like.
Yeah. Everybody, I think, should have a food scale.
Yeah.
And just audit things every now and then. I do it. What the Greek yogurt, snack before bed that I was telling you about. I buy the
in bulk or
big jar. Yeah. No, it's not. It's like whatever. It's like it's got
Multiple servings.
Multiple servings, yes. And I don't want to just eyeball it. I want to know like what a serving is. I want to know what I'm eating. So I like weigh it on the freaking scale, And it's not that I'm like obsessing over like I've got to get it just right. Sometimes it's over, under, but I want to know what a serving is.
Yeah, and you can eyeball it after that. Once you get a good idea. Yeah, there's
everybody should have a scale.
Yeah, I don't know if I've talked about this on your show, that the 4 stages of learning. This is true for anything, but it starts with unconscious incompetence, meaning you just don't know what you don't know. A lot of people are there when it comes to foods. So you once you start to learn about foods, like for example, if you're listening to this podcast, you may be moving into the second stage, which is now conscious incompetence. So now you're like, oh, I don't know all this stuff. I probably should weigh that apple, or, I didn't know there was a 10%, that it could be 10% higher in calories that the FDA allows for or whatever. Like now you're consciously incompetent. And then what you do is you start to pay attention and you start to modify things. And that's the third stage, which is conscious competence. But when you do that and you practice it, what you want to move to is the fourth stage, which is unconscious competence, where it just becomes stress-free. Because if you get stuck in the weighing and measuring, which we've talked about many times, that is a stressful way to live. And nobody wants to do that all the time. But I think if you weigh 8 ounces of steak, 6 ounces of chicken, what is a handful of nuts? How much does that weigh? What is that supposed to be considered? Like, what is a serving of this? Weigh it, get an idea, do that a few times, then you can eyeball it on your own, and it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, super important. I mean, I do like heavy cream in my coffee in the morning, and I'm making sure that I'm putting like a tablespoon in it just so I know, because the difference between a tablespoon and 2 tablespoons is like almost 100 calories.
You ever seen what people consider like a tablespoon of peanut butter?
Oh yeah, it's
like 4 tablespoons. I was that guy.
Really?
I'm like, that's a tablespoon, right? No, that's not a tablespoon. That's like 4. How do you feel with the heavy cream with your caffeine? Do you notice the caffeine's a little bit more smooth?
I love it, dude. I think it tastes great. I think that there's a strong argument to be made for if you're a coffee drinker. You don't have to be a coffee drinker, and if you're dairy sensitive, maybe
coconut,
maybe don't do it. Yeah, but also like heavy cream has virtually no fat. Sorry, it does have fat. It has virtually no carbohydrates and no protein in it. So it's got no casein. If you're casein sensitive, it shouldn't really have any lactose. Maybe trace lactose. But
I've used it before. Yeah, caffeine. If you pair caffeine with a fat, you tend to get a more sustained. You don't get the spike and crash as much as you get when you consume it with a fat. That's why the bulletproof coffee became. I think a lot of people really enjoyed it because they noticed that the energy lasted a little longer.
Yeah,
it was the fat that was in there.
Exactly, and I think bulletproof coffee is delicious. However, I don't think that butter is I've relegated butter to more of an indulgence food, like a YOLO food.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's the lack of milk fat globule membrane, which we might have talked about when I was on your show. Yeah, when you could feed people heavy cream and butter. Butter is just churned cream, right? And you'll see an adverse effect on lipids after the butter feeding as compared to
I did not know that.
As compared to
And what does it have to do with?
It's called milk fat globule membrane.
Oh, interesting.
So basically what it is that milk is similar to blood in the sense that it's mostly water, and you've got these droplets of fats that are perfectly suspended within the mostly aqueous solution, right? So Mother Nature is brilliant, right? It's devised what are essentially lipoproteins. Like you've heard of like LDL lipoprotein, right? It keeps like the fats in your blood soluble in the solution that is mostly water, which is your blood, right? So similarly in milk, you've got all these fats, right, that are encapsulated by this lipoprotein called milk fat globule membrane, which is like this complex of phospholipids and sphingomyelin, actually compounds that are really good for the brain. So I have this theory that milk fat actually is particularly supportive of brain health. Because if you think about like a neonate, right, the brain is under rapid growth and development.
Wow.
And so I think that dairy is actually this, like if you're a kid, you obviously are, you produce the lactase enzyme, right? So I think it actually is a very healthy food. I've come around like on dairy.
Dairy is if you can tolerate, if you don't have an intolerance to it, it's one of the most nutrient dense, healthy food, and it's the full fat versions.
Yeah,
that tend to be the best.
Yeah.
What about eggs for brain development? It's really good, right? Because of the choline and the nutrients. Because I have my baby son. He eats. It's funny. He has a slight intolerance to egg whites. So every morning he eats a 3 yolk scramble.
Interesting.
And
people that have egg sensitivity, it's going to be to the egg white.
Usually, right?
Yeah, it's not going to be to the egg yolk. An egg yolk is like it's like a cognitive multivitamin is what I consider it.
Are they considering choline essential yet?
It's conditionally essential.
Okay.
It's conditionally essential. So you have to eat it, but it's not technically essential because we do manufacture in our own bodies a little bit of choline, but we definitely need it. It used to be considered a vitamin.
Yeah. You talk about, you were earlier talking about your favorite high protein snack. For me, it's just boiled eggs. I'll have boiled eggs in the fridge, and it's a very easy 6 or 7 grams of protein, put a little salt on it, and nothing makes me feel better than eggs. And from a performance standpoint, when I eat, I probably will average 8 to 12 eggs a day. And I notice a big difference in strength and muscle performance when I go from that down to like no eggs, like if I go on vacation or something like that.
You're eating almost a dozen eggs a day?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Every day?
You should see my cholesterol numbers. When I do my cholesterol, my doctors are always like, this is the best profile I've ever seen.
Wow.
And then I tell them I eat like 10 eggs a day.
You guys hear that? That's freaking awesome. Yeah. Dude, amazing. But wait, I was going to say something about coffee that I think is also really interesting because I looked into this, that another benefit of putting heavy cream in your coffee is that coffee, is one of America's top sources of polyphenols, right? And these compounds are fat soluble. So actually, if you're ingesting coffee on an empty stomach in the morning, which I used to do, and I used to get like jitters from the caffeine infusion. So the adding the fat to the coffee helps with that as well. I feel better when I drink it, but also you're making a lot of these like phytochemicals in coffee more bioavailable.
Oh, just like having a fat soluble vitamin with some fat.
But whole milk does this as well, right? And half and half to some degree does this as well. However, milk proteins have been shown to interfere with the absorption of those same compounds. So what's great about heavy cream is that it doesn't have any protein in it, but it has fat that makes those compounds more bioavailable, and it doesn't hinder your access to them the way that milk protein will.
I saw your post on caffeine, speaking of coffee, and its health effects on the liver.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that? So years ago, I had got real deep into just reading on cancer and I had found studies that showed that caffeine and coffee reduces liver cancer risks. And then you talked about that pathway that caffeine seems to work with in terms of improving health of the liver. And I was like, that's probably what it is.
Yeah. Well, it acts like a natural PCSK9 inhibitor, which is this new family of cholesterol lowering drugs. They're called PCSK9 inhibitors. When you inhibit this protein PCSK9, it increases availability of the LDL receptor on the liver, which is this receptor that bobs up to the surface of the liver that sucks in like ApoB containing lipoproteins, like your LDL cholesterol, and it sucks them in, dismantles them, uses cholesterol to create bile acids and the like. But so it makes your liver a more efficient cholesterol recycling machine.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's phenomenal. Do you take...
The dose was very high in that study where we discovered this. It was like 400 milligrams of caffeine or something like that. But like conceivably, unless there's like a threshold effect, caffeine is good.
It is. Yeah, that's an individual thing, right? For some people, it can cause a lot of... I'll do about 300 a day on average is what my caffeine intake. Do you take theanine with your caffeine?
I was at a certain point, but it's not...
Does it make a difference for you?
Well, no, the issue is that theanine doesn't stir in easily. Like I haven't found a theanine that stirs in, so I have to blend it. And I just
No, take the capsule.
Oh, yeah, I could do that. Yeah, you're right.
What are you putting in it? Like, that tastes gross.
I'm always thinking about it because everybody's trying to like engineer their coffee to be some kind of like, no, yeah, you're right.
No, I literally have a little tray because we have an espresso machine. My wife has it every morning.
That's smart. Yeah, I should do
we have a little tray of theanine and you just take your...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 200 milligrams of theanine with your espresso.
What does that do? What is that?
Oh, it balances out the so I love, so here's the I don't know what you want to call it, the unhealthy side of me. I really enjoy taking substances and supplements. And I say substances, I don't mean illegal, maybe, but usually not. But I really enjoy modulating how I feel and, how am I going to feel in my workouts, or I'm going to write a blog, or I'm going to work on a book or whatever. So caffeine with theanine, I get this really, and the studies will show this, you get this really nice, a more euphoric feeling from the caffeine, and it lasts longer. And then for people who are prone to anxiety from caffeine, it lowers it.
Fascinating.
Yeah, they're synergistic.
Yeah, caffeine, and you naturally find theanine in green tea, which also has caffeine, right?
Yeah. So that might be why some people feel better on green tea than they do caffeine. Although I don't know how high the theanine is. I'd stick to about 200 milligrams of theanine per. I go 1-to-1. So if it's 200 milligrams caffeine, it'll be 200 milligrams of theanine.
Fascinating. Good to know. Yeah, and your average cup of coffee is like 1 to 200 milligrams of caffeine. Theanine's a good example of like one of these non-essential amino acids. It's like because we have our like essential amino acids, right? But L-theanine is like this, like I guess it's like a plant. It's like this like plant amino acid.
Yeah, it's supplemented on an empty stomach by itself. It's actually a pretty good mild it's an anxiolytic, so it's anti-anxiety. So you can actually, if you have like mild anxiety, you could supplement with theanine throughout the day, and you might notice some benefit. And then speaking of amino acids, citrulline. A study just came out showing it helps with blood vessel health because it contributes to nitric oxide production.
Interesting.
Your body synthesizes citrulline into arginine, which it's more effective than just supplementing with arginine because your body tends to destroy it when you supplement it with that way. But you get more nitric oxide, blood vessels open up and are healthier. So you're probably going to start seeing these in heart health supplements too, like, for lowering blood pressure and stuff.
Or also for like sexual performance.
It's already there.
Yeah, already there.
Yeah, they are. They already have citrulline and pump supplements and all that stuff.
What do we have to do to get you back on Instagram?
They have to let me back on with my
on.
original. It's kind of nice being off, dude.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge, it's funny about doing what we do. I don't know if you're this way. I love it because I love what I do and I love helping people and I love hearing about how we've impacted people. Then I'm also private and I also don't like social media and I don't like the back and forth and on social media type of deal. So it's this interesting, like, I like it. And then there's parts of it I'm like,
No, I get sometimes too caught up. It's like something that I want to improve just, in my own life. Like I'm a little bit too much on social media.
You know what? When Joe Rogan was going through it was like a little while ago when he was going through his whole shitstorm or whatever, he said he didn't even pay attention. He just turned it off. I'm like, well, yeah, duh. I should just do that. Sometimes.
Post and ghost.
Yes.
That's what I aspire to. And I am getting better at it, just to be fair to myself. Like I am getting better at posting ghosting, just like drop the post.
Let people argue in the comments.
Yeah. I mean, I try to spend like 15 minutes because, obviously like I love my followers. So I do want to answer questions as they arise, but I don't want to, dwell on it too much and like, and stay for the haters that show up and the trolls. Cause they inevitably, they find my page via the explore page.
Yeah.
And it's just, I posted this thing recently about the Tufts University Food Compass initiative, which
is this the one that showed that like frosted mini wheats was better than?
Yeah.
Can you believe that they would put something like that out and it's not
insane
and it's not satire?
It's insane. I mean, all those foods, they were. I mean, that was part of the.
I thought it was satire. I swear to God, I thought it was a joke, like Babylon Bee or someone put it out.
What people need to do is like reverse that whole thing, right? Like the foods that were all the way at the bottom, like to be minimized, were the healthiest foods on that list. Eggs.
What's weird?
Ground beef.
Is it okay? Is it just me or does it feel like they're like purposefully misleading people? It's really because it's not
money.
Like right. It's not like kind of off, like where you could kind of debate, like, well, maybe whatever. It's literally the opposite.
Yeah.
It's really, really strange. I literally thought it was satire. Before I shared it, I saw you posted it. And I'm like, well, Max does his research, so he would know if this is satire. I'm like, but I got to double check because this looks crazy. There's no way. I looked it up. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
They actually did put this out.
Well, the graph that I posted. So remember that researcher I mentioned earlier, Ty Beal? We've never collaborated. I have no affiliation with him, but I love his work. And he posted that, or he published that paper that I talked about earlier, where they looked at all the, they published a hierarchy of nutrient dense foods. He was one of the authors on this paper where it was a critique of the Food Compass paper that came out from Tufts. And they either used the algorithm to determine the score for each of these foods, but actually what I think was that these foods were included in supplementary material that was published with the study. So they basically they created this chart to show the irony, like
how ridiculous it is.
How ridiculous it was. Yeah. So they published that. So that chart was actually from the critique of the Tufts paper, which, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, it went completely ignored. Like they haven't responded to it. The Tufts University authors who published this Food Compass pyramid, and they're funded by Barilla, right? Which makes pasta. And I honestly try not to be to let my head go into those conspiratorial territories, but it's it has to be the money, right? It's
yeah, these regulatory agencies, a lot of the people that run them were people that were running these large, companies, food companies, and they go back and forth and trade all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but there was this initiative years ago where they were trying to change school lunches, and they made this like, okay, it has to have a vegetable in their food because that's what they said. Okay, it's gonna be healthier if we add a vegetable. And they actually passed. They went and they lobbied and they passed and made it that pizza sauce would be considered a vegetable because it's made from tomatoes.
Wow.
So yeah, dude, I don't. So they're like, oh, pizza that meets the criteria for having a vegetable in it.
Nuts. Yeah, I mean, just it's like it's so crazy. Some of these like evidence, in air quotes, evidence-based personalities on social media will, they'll become apologists for, these like food companies and I've heard people say that like French fries are a vegetable because they're potatoes, and potato.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? One thing that you said once you were on our show and you said something, and I've used it a million times now, and I try to credit you each time because it's, and I don't know if you first said this, but I love it. You said, don't be science bound, be science based.
That's a Max original. Yeah.
Okay.
Evidence based, but not evidence bound.
So that is your original.
That's me. Yeah.
Because I always say this, my friend Max said this, Lugavere, and it's incredible. And I love it because evidence is great, but we discredit hundreds or thousands of years as wisdom as evidence. So it's like, ashwagandha, an Ayurvedic herb that's been used for, thousands of years for anxiety and improve fertility in men. Until there's a study that we've done, there's no evidence to show that it works.
Right.
Well, they've been using it for thousands of years. That's a lot of anecdote. Like I know one anecdote or maybe 50 anecdote or like an internet group, maybe not the best anecdote, but when you have thousands of years or hundreds of years, there's going to be something there. When it comes to food, oh my God, like we have thousands and thousands of years. We have more than that, right? Of wisdom around food. When kids used to get sick before vitamins were invented, we would give them, liver or cod liver oil or whole milk, right? Or, whole eggs or whatever. And look at cultures that have been around for forever. How do they eat? When hunter-gatherers kill an animal, they go eat the organs first and they eat the rest. And so I think we got to look at that and stop making it so damn complicated. Need to see a study. Show me a study.
Yeah.
No, what do you mean? I like those studies.
Show me the data.
Yeah, I like the studies, but there's tons of evidence that's been around for thousands of years and wisdom around what foods are probably the best to eat.
100%. And we're just out here undermining all that. Yeah, that knowledge and wisdom. It's screwed up.
It is. But I'm glad you're here, dude.
Yeah, likewise.
Because you're on you're helping.
Thanks, man.
You're helping against it.
Well, there's this like great Mr. Rogers quote: "Find the helpers."
Oh, I love that one.
Find the people that are trying to help.
Yeah,
and keep them in your orbit.
Well, I will say this: I'm doing this as long as I have. It's easier to access information now, for sure. The bandwidth on the internet there's no comparison to, when I was younger and we had, magazines and TV and radio. So there's more bad information now for sure, but there's a lot more good information as well. And I always think of this because sometimes I get like dark and, oh man, I can't believe people are going in this direction or what's going on. But I'll tell you, dude, when I go to gyms now, I see women lifting weights like properly. I see people using squat racks. When I talk with people about nutrition, the questions that they ask me are different than what they used to. Now I hear people talk so the good stuff I think is really starting to come out. And I believe that good information beats bad information over time. I really do.
Yeah. Hey, if you like that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.
Plants are actually the ones that are able to synthesize these essential amino acids, and then other animals eat them, and then those essential amino acids become part of their own tissue, and then when we eat them, we're able to get those essential amino acids. For example, that's how you end up getting it from eating another animal.